this is group 4. We are going to take part on colonial legacies in India. And therefore, before we begin, let's pray. Mighty and everlasting Father, what's in heaven, thank you for this time. As we're going to begin this lesson, pray that you may be with us. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. Okay, we are going to begin with the introduction part. And I'm going to tell you the meaning of legacy. This is the custom, traditions, practices, patterns of beliefs and rules which are inherited by a political system from the past, which make a lasting impact upon the working of the political system for years to come. British rule in India lasted for almost 200 years. The impact of this rule in India was widespread in nature, and during this long span of time, several religions were enacted to facilitate smooth administration. After a long struggle against British colonial rule, India finally gained independence in 1947. To make the process of transition from colonial to independent Asia, the architects of the country decided to retain most of the administrative and political measures that had been used by the British. This system handed over, followed by Indian system, is known as colonial legacy and can be divided into one, political legacy, second, economic legacy, and the third one, social legacy. Okay, we are going to begin with the first presenter on political legacy.
As we have looked at the introduction part of the presentation, part of the political legacy of British rule in India, we want to now embark on the political legacy, which when we talk about political, we are talking about the system of ruling. Of course, when we look at the legacy, that is what we something like an impact which was left behind and still can be felt up to today, more in the modern society. Thereafter, the British rule in India took almost 200 years, and much of the things that were left behind was that they adopted the democratic system of government, where there was also a parliamentary system of government, which has continued to persist up to today. Thereafter, we find that there is also what we call the freedom of speech and freedom of movement, and there's an idea of government by discussion in India up to today. And the system of ruling, which is politically, has been divided into three, where we have the diarchy, the central bureaucracy, and the federal system. When you talk about the diarchy, you find that it is a system of ruling where there is government by two independent authorities, and the central bureaucracy is where the government administration managed by the department staff with non-elected officials. Another thing is the central system of government. And now I think all of you may know this when we talk about federal system of government, where we have the national government and the small government below it. Like in Kenya, for example, I can give the example. In Kenya, we have the national government and we have the county government. That is a clear example or a good example of the federal system of government, and that one can still be felt in India up to today. Thereafter, much in detail will be explained by one of my colleagues. Will take you to deep explanation of the diarchy, central bureaucracy, and the federal system of government. Okay, thank you.
So, hello, we will be continuing the political legacies left by the British in India. So, we are going to look at the diarchy, where the top of subject of administration being divided into two categories, that is the central and provincial. So, the central part, this is where now we are talking about the main government, and the provincial. Now, this was a breakdown from the main government into provinces. So, the central subject were those which were to kept under the control of central government, while the provincial subject was subdivided into transferred and residuary subjects. The reserved subjects were mostly being administered by the governor. So now this is when we talk about the provinces. Now the head was the governor, where he was held by an executive council without responsibility of legislative, whereby in the present Indian constitution, the provision of such ruling are not found in similar provision, yet some provision resemble them. We are now going to look at the centralized bureaucracy. So we find that the British government created a large bureaucracy to run the government. Now these were now the non-elected officials, with districts as the units of administration, and they were given special powers during the region, such as they had to tackle any type of situation which might have emerged from disobediences. Now the disobedience by the subjects, such as they had to tackle any type of situation which might have emerged. Okay, we talked about disobediences, movements. Most of the members of the Indian civil services were very much loyal to the British government, where the administration hierarchy was from the Governor General to the Tehsildars at the village level. So in the leaders at the village levels, they were called the Tehsildars. The members of the Indian civil services were not appointed in the Governor General Executive Council, but were recruited through a competitive examination for entrance with age limits, whereby after the independence, many locals have entered the Indian civil services, and the structure was retained, where even today it is the way frame of administration. Furthermore, the main features of the British governmental and administrative system, like the parliamentary form of government. Now, a good example is the British system, whereby you have a prime minister and representatives who now represent the districts. A federal structure. Now, this is where we gave an example of Kenya, where we have the main government headed by the president and the smaller governments headed by the governors, now the county governments. Governors in the states, secretariat system, central and state administration. Civil services, district and regional administration, the procedures of work, rule of law, and local government continue to be the main points of the present Indian administrative system, which were adopted from the British. So, about the colonial system, we find that this is what they inherited, and up to today, when we go to the Indian system of government, this is what we see. Thank you. My next colleague will be continuing on the economic legacy in India.
I'm the next presenter, and I'm Teacher Martha. I'll take you through the economic legacy in India. Okay, while India has come a long way since gaining independence, that was 1947, it's still faced with ongoing hardships that were shaped by the British Empire domination of the country. And today we find that the modern India as the second fastest growing economy. Not as during that time when they were involved in the British economic activities. We find that the modern, it is the fastest growing economy in the world. As you all know that India is one of the developed countries in the world. It is not as our country, Kenya. Okay? We find that, but according to the International Monetary Fund, that is IMF, that was the 2012 World Economic Outlook report. It's still a developing nation. India's share of the global income went from 27%, that is in 1700, up to 3.8% in 1950. India's economic stayed stagnant. Why? There are some reasons as to why the economy of India, though it was a developed country, but there are some reasons as to why the economy stayed stagnant for 90 years. Wow, that's too long. We find some of the reasons were Britain establishment of an agricultural base in India. This led to providing cheap labor, raw materials to England at the cost of local citizens. As you know, those people, when they come, some of them, they were just looking down upon us. So it went like that. So the Indians' economy went down and it was very stagnant. Another reason was that India was left as an economically underdeveloped, surely. This was very serious. It was left underdeveloped nation marked by hunger, poverty, and low national income. Those are some of the reasons that made India to be stagnant for 90 days. Another thing was that we found that recovering from such devastation, it doesn't happen overnight. And India is still struggling to win its battle with poverty. In 2011, the World Bank stated that 32.7% of Indians live below the international poverty line. And that is 1.25 per day. That's so serious. Just imagine your country was well developed and over suddenly poverty just came and ran off. That's so serious. Another thing was that the British made railway lines that not only led to a rise in income levels and a decline in the uncertainty in income, but recent evidence suggests that the intensity of famines lessened as the railway network increased. The development of an elaborate railway network primarily intensified the commercialization of agriculture.
Okay, hello. I'll continue in the economic legacies left by the British to the Indian economy. Okay, after the British had left India, not only did they exploit, but they also left their legacy. And the first point, we look at the commercialization of Indian agriculture during the British period. When you commercialize something, it means we earn money in return. Early before the British came to India, Indians used to produce food crops. They only used it at their homes, they didn't sell them. But after the British came, they introduced selling of goods. In that, we know that British were undergoing industrial revolution. There was a lot of industries growing in Britain, and therefore they needed a source of raw materials. And when they came to India, they used India to get those raw materials, then transported to their growing industries. Another point, we find that there was development of trade. After the British government had colonized India, the trade patterns between India and Britain developed as well, especially the southern part of India. They used to grow their crops, sell them, and they get money. And they mostly did it to the British government. Thus, we find that when the British left India, they left their legacy on trade. Another thing, there was development of agrarian economy. Agrarian economy, it means that there was policies integrated to the Indian customs which significantly changed the economic structure of the country, whereby it provided more ground for UK companies to be established in the country. So in short, you can say the economic legacies left on the Indian economy actually benefited the Indian government.
I'm Teacher Bernard, and I'm going to take you through the social legacies of the Indian government in India. First, social legacies are those legacies that affected the social life of the Indians. Right from the beginning, the relationship between India had come a long way. Had come as traders, had become rulers and administrators, and had influenced economic and political systems of the country. Their impact on cultural and social life was, however, gradual. Till 1813, they followed a policy of non-interference in the social and cultural life of Indians. Yet changes were taking place in these fields. These changes mostly was related to education, the condition of women, and the caste system, and various social practices. First, we are going to look at the education system, how the British affected the education system of the Indians. The British took in interest in introducing the English language in India. They had many reasons for doing this. First was that educating Indians in the English language was part of their strategy. The Indians would be ready to work as clerks on low wages, while for the same work, the British would demand higher wages. This would reduce the expenditure on administering India. Also, it was expected to create a class of Indians who are loyal to the British and were not able to relate to other Indians. This class of Indians will be taught to appreciate the culture and opinion of the British. In addition, they will also keen to increase the market for the British goods. They wanted to use the education as a means to strengthen their political authority in the country. The British assumed that a few educated Indians would spread English culture to the masses, that they would be able to rule through the class of educated Indians. The British gave jobs to only those Indians who knew how to speak English and write English, thereby compelling many Indians to go to school to learn English language. Milton will take you through the examples of educational policies implemented under the British rule in India.
Look at the educational policies in India. The first one is the Charter Act of 1813, where the British Parliament issued an act with a sum of 1 lakh rupee, which was sanctioned for promoting Western sciences in India. And we see that this Charter Act of 1813 was implemented, and it was implemented, and it favored the teaching of Western ideas and literature through the medium of English language. Let's look at Macaulay's Minute of 1835. That Thomas Macaulay was the first law member in the Governor General's Council and promoted the English language as a tool for educating the people in Western thought and ideas. And William Bendix supported Macaulay's views, and in 1835, the British government passed an act declaring that educational funds would be utilized for imparting Western education through the medium of English. And in 1844, English language was the official language, and it was declared that people having the knowledge of English will be preferred for public employment. And then the last one is Wood Dispatch of 1854. And Charles Wood worked out a plan for educational reorganization, and through the Wood's Dispatch, the government declared its intention of creating a properly articulated system of education from primary school to university. And in accordance with the Wood Dispatch, departments of education were instituted in all provinces, and universities were established in Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras in 1857. So let's look at the impacts of education in India. So the first one is Western education influenced the Indian society. For instance, as a result of the exposure to ideas of Adam Smith, John Locke, Jeremy Bentham, and Voltaire, Indians began to recognize the need for change. Another one, the imposition of English in the education system was a blessing in disguise, and Indians from diverse regions speaking different languages could now communicate with each other through the medium of English. and English thus united the educated Indians and brought about a feeling of oneness among them. The last one, the spread of English language and Western education, it helped Indians to adopt modern, rational, democratic, liberal, and patriotic outlook. So let's look at the social reforms and changes under the British. So before the British came, we see there were some practices which were still practiced in India. For instance, there was child marriage, female infanticide, sati, polygamy, and rigid caste systems were very prevalent. So there are those individuals who are at the forefront of these movements of eradicating such practices, such as Rajaram Mohan Roy, Sir Syed Ahmed Khan, Haruna Asaf Ali, and Pandita Ramabal. And these movements looked for social unity and strived towards liberty, equality, and fraternity. And many legal measures were introduced to improve the status of women, and they include the following. The practice of sati was banned in 1829 by Lord Bentinck, the Governor General. Another one, widow remarriage was permitted by a law passed in 1856, and a law passed in 1872 sanctioned their intercaste and intercommunal marriages. Sharda Act was passed in 1929 preventing child marriage, and the act provided that it was illegal to marry a girl below 14 years and a boy below 18 years. And the impact of such efforts made by these numerous individuals and reform societies, religious organizations, was felt all over and was most evident in the national movement. And women started getting better education opportunities and took up professions and public employment outside their homes.
Hello class, I hope we have learned too much from the colonial legacies in India. So in our conclusion, we are just going to summarize whatever we have learned. And one, we have known that India was colonized by the British, and their colonization took almost 200 years. So the legacies that they left, they are numerous, a lot. We have seen with the political, economic, and social. And did you know that India is the largest English speaking language in the world? That's a legacy. English is not their language, English is from Britain. So, in the infrastructure, just to recap on what they have said, in the infrastructure by 1890, British has constructed more than 2,300 miles of tarmac road, 2,000 miles of railway, 70,000 miles of canals. They constructed bridges, and you see, these railways, they are still there. Just like here in Kenya, we have the lunatic. Do you remember the lunatic railway that was constructed by the British? If you go to Nairobi, you'll get that. Furthermore, in India, when you go to Mumbai, you will get the British railways. Also, these British left both positive and negative legacies. If you analyze whatever we have said clearly, for example, I've just said one positive legacy. In the negative legacy, we find that the British exploited the Indians within their rule until India gained independence. We find that more than 37 million Indians died because of hunger. Why? Because these people this British, these colonialists just focused and forced the Indians to cultivate cash crops, forgetting what to eat. They were to plant tea, not to plant no maize. They were to plant cotton, but not to plant beans. Why? Because these food crops could not give their profit to the British. But by planting cotton, they would export them and gain a lot of benefits from it. So finally, we can say that also the Indian border was this Indian border. I don't know how you will take it, but you'll see some of the how this Indian border was created. It has brought a lot of conflicts. For example, you know the issue about the Kashmir border. It is between India and Pakistan. Pakistan are saying that this is our territory. Indians are saying that this is our territory. You see, it was done by the British, not by the Indians. That's brought a lot of conflicts between their neighbors. Thank you, class. I hope you enjoyed the lesson. God be with you. Thank you.